I feel bad even starting this video because I feel like it's pretty negative. So just warning, and also I feel like I'm a bad realtor talking through the disadvantages of living in Washington. Clearly, I sell homes in Washington. That's how I make a living. So like, I do want you to move here. But if you're gonna move here, you should also know the things that suck about living in Washington State. It's not all sunshine and roses. Well, you know that because it's so rainy. But just keep that in mind. There are so many pros to living in Washington State. But in this video, we're talking about the disadvantages of living in Washington. Through much of the 2010s, Washington was among the top states for drawing newcomers from other parts of the nation. From 2015 to 2019, we had annual net gains of more than 35,000 people. In 2016, the peak year, about 68,000 people moved into Washington. 68,000 people, more people moved into Washington than moved away. So according to Forbes, 13,000 families moved out of Washington State in 2022. Does that mean Washington is not a good place to live? Let's talk about some of the factors driving people out of the state and specifically the disadvantages of living in Washington State. I have done a video very similar to this topic before, which focuses on why people do choose to leave Washington, and I'm going to link that above. I recommend you take a look at it. Thank you for watching. I make a new video every week on life and real estate here in Southwest Washington. I was raised in Camas. I have spent most of my life in Clark County, and I make videos for this YouTube channel to share what it's like living here. If you like my videos, take a moment to subscribe and turn on that bell for notifications. I make a new video every week, and if you ever want to have a conversation about what it's like living in Southwest Washington, you want to just chat about it, pros and cons, what are the best places to live, don't be shy. I'm very easy to get a hold of, and my phone number and my email address are in the header above, and they're also in the description down below. All right, the first big disadvantage, cost of living. This is the disadvantage of living in Washington. It's definitely home prices. While the cost of living is going up everywhere right now, we are seeing that in home prices, grocery prices, and even coffee prices, Washington homes are pretty expensive, with a median sales price just shy of $600,000. It is more expensive to purchase a home in Washington than most of the rest of the United States, which has a home price average below $400,000. Washington also has a pretty high sales tax at 6.5%, and that sales tax at the state level, that's just the base. Each county also slaps on their own sales tax. Here in Southwest Washington and Clark County, the sales tax is roughly 8.5%. Depending on the jurisdiction, it might be slightly higher, it might be slightly lower. Some people are drawn to Washington because there's no state income tax here though. During COVID, we had newcomers just swarming Southwest Washington once they figured out that they could work from home and they could also work in a place that they did not have to pay income tax. Gave themselves a little raise there. Another disadvantage of living in Washington is crime. The Pacific Northwest has been a pretty hot area to move to for years, and that population growth has resulted in a lot of crowded, high traffic areas. This has created a housing shortage that construction is constantly trying to keep up with. Washington runs a very tight ship in the land development department. So throwing new homes up on some dirt is not as easy as it sounds. This leads to a lack of affordable housing. High density housing like apartments are popping up more frequently, and higher population numbers can drive up crime rates in areas that have not had issues before. So according to neighborhoodscout.com, the violent crime rate last year was 3.36%, 3.6 per 1,000 residents. Property crimes occurred at a rate of 31 per 1,000 residents. The national median is 19, so Washington definitely has a problem here. The chances of becoming a victim of crime in Washington are roughly 100 in 298. Here in Clark County, we have one of the lowest funded sheriff departments in the United States, with 0.87 officers per 1,000 residents. That's not very good. In Vancouver, we also have what we call the Portland Creep, which is the homeless problem coming across the bridge from Portland. It is not as bad in Vancouver as it is in Portland, but some people just don't like it. So if you have been to Seattle lately, it's worse there than it is in Vancouver, and it's worse in Portland than it is in Vancouver. So with all the population surges of the 2010s across Washington, some cities have not managed the growth very well. some of their residents have left Washington in search of other less populated areas where they are looking for less crime. So this is a heavy video. There are many great things about Washington State, so don't get too down about these stats. Remember, this video is focusing just on the disadvantages of only the disadvantages of living in Washington State. If you are considering a move to Washington at some point, you gotta take off those rose-colored glasses and acknowledge that there are negatives to living here. Only 2 more big disadvantages to get through, so just hang in there. Another disadvantage of living in Washington is the upcoming earthquake. It's gonna hit sometime. I don't know how big of a factor this really is for people, but there's a common knowledge that the Northwest is overdue for a big earthquake. It is fondly or not fondly referred to as the big one. So this could be a deterrent for people looking at houses west of the I-5 corridor throughout the state. A bigger factor as far as earthquakes go is how safe the buildings and structures are and if they're going to withstand an earthquake like that. So accompanying a big earthquake would also perhaps be a tsunami, which might be another factor pushing residents inland in Washington and further away from the coast. So I would be remiss if I didn't at least touch on the weather. So some people love the Northwest because it has all 4 seasons, but many just cannot handle the months and months and months of rain and gray skies. It rains very steadily from November through March and sometimes into April or May, and a couple years ago, it rained all through June. We don't get the giant downpours less frequently like other areas. Our rain is slow and steady. It's kind of a constant drizzle that eats away at your soul. It definitely gets old when the sun sets at 4 p.m. in the winter and you start counting down the days until spring. Southwest Washington gets an average of about 40 inches of rain per year, and that is 10 inches more rain than the national average. But honestly, there is a reason people stay in the Northwest. People here don't let the weather stop them from enjoying the outdoors, and we're pretty well outfitted for indoor activities with all of our cute little boutiques, coffee shops, restaurants, breweries, wineries, and bars. Many people make it through the winter enjoying snow sports and taking trips to warmer climates to get out of the rain. And once the sun does reemerge in the spring, it is worth it. The Pacific Northwest has absolutely the best summers, and people here appreciate the summers. After all of that rain and gray, like, you appreciate the sun. So if you want to know more about moving to Washington, check out my series on the topic, and I'm going to link that right here. I'll put a link in the description down below as well. Let me know in the comments below if any of these reasons impacted your home search in Washington, or if you are looking for a change of scenery, send me a message.